Well, it's almost over, don't be afraid. I have not slides, and I will speak of the actual situation of our church in Italy, and I will do that on 7 points. A general introduction. The Waldensian Church, as you all know, is small, old, and divided in 2 parts. We heard one part, the Uruguay and Argentina, Rio de la Plata, and the other part, which is the European area. I will speak about the Italian, Waldensian, and Methodist Church, which have been a single church since 1979. Although the Methodists, who are minority, feel always a bit depressed because everybody in Italy knows the name Waldensian and nobody knows about Methodists. A church who is divided in 2 also from another point of view. Half of the church members are still living in the 2 valleys called Waldensian valleys. The other live dispersed throughout Italy, where there are few big churches, Milan, Rome, Palermo, Turin. Elsewhere, there are little congregations where it's not rare for 3 or 4 churches, even 100 kilometers apart, to have one single minister. Like all long-established European churches, and I am not proud of it, but it is quite typical of all Europe nowadays, we are majorly affected by secularization, fall in membership number, but this fall of membership is partially compensated by people joining from the Catholic or atheist background. The economic problem of maintaining pastors is becoming increasingly difficult, as is the social and economic situation in Italy, living a crisis which now seems without an escape route. On top of this, we need to consider that our church has emerged from a profound cultural transformation. Less than 1 century ago, the Waldensian valleys were populated by French-speaking agricultural workers, the result of the ghetto in which all Waldensians were constrained to live until 1848. Nowadays, our young people leave the valley to study and work. You must be aware that 40% of Italians under 35 are unemployed, and they leave the little congregation in the south of Italy for the same reason. It seems that it is only the congregation in towns in central and north Italy which with difficulty withstand this problem. Italy is having to confront the crisis which is preventing our young people from starting a family, and the resulting fall in birth rate is becoming a major problem, as how will we pay the pension of older people? Older people who are already forced to work until they are at least 67, and since the Waldensian Church has always been prophetical, it is 20 years now that we decided the pastor will work until 70. And I am not pleased of that too. Hopefully, this short introduction will have given you an idea of the variety of complex issues which we have before us now. Now I would like to speak of some specific question. You think of Italy, you must think also of the government of Italy, which is called Vatican. I'm sorry. The reality of the Catholic Church. So, I will speak of the relationship with the Roman Catholic Church. For the Protestant world, the relationship began to change with the Second Vatican Council. We know that. Until then, our church had been firstly persecuted until 1848, then tolerated, but with a lot of local discrimination until 1950. Today, the situation is different because the Roman Catholic Church in Italy has also been hit by secularization. So much that there are some Catholic representatives, the most progressive of them, who think of their church as a minority too. Added to this, immigration has led to the birth of a multi-religious country as well as a multi-denominational country. The second most numerous Christian denomination in Italy is nowadays the Orthodox Church because of the immigration of many Romanians coming to live in Italy. If with the former Pope, the German one, was about the frosty ecumenical situation, now with the present Pope, the Argentinian one, the situation is radically different. 3 years ago, in June, for the first time in history, a Pope entered the Waldensian church in the town of Turin. But it wouldn't be right to say that it all began then. Indeed, already for decades, at local level, there had been ecumenical meeting between Catholic and Protestant churches. Actually, as the president of our synod in the 2000, I signed a joint document recognizing interdenominational marriages with the Italian Episcopal Conference. At present, we are looking at proposal for a liturgy for the baptism of the children of these couples. Let me say an example of how things are not going on so smoothly. We studied a document in the Waldensian Valley together with the local Catholic dioceses. And we agreed on a document. This document was a document promoting a liturgy for a common baptism. We said, okay, it's done. Then the Catholic sent it to Rome. And the answer was, don't even think about that. So it is not going always so smoothly. Because we must realize that the differences are still there. Our vision of the church is one that manages the grace of, is not one that manages the grace of God, but that announces it. There remain theological differences about ministry, ecclesiology, the sacrament, the role of the women in the church. And we do not want to ignore these points. Indeed, we want to be able to discuss them with our Catholic brothers and sisters, frankly, and within the richness of the diversity of the Christian Church. There are also ethical issues upon which our position is far from that of the Catholic Church. Nominally, homosexuality, euthanasia, the sense of sanctity of life. However, this must not drag us backward into comparison and animosity that we can be nothing but grateful for the new period of dialogue that we are experiencing today. Obviously, there will always be a difference. Our ecumenical vision of unity is different from the Catholic one, which can be summarized: a flock under a pastor. In fact, we continue to walk the road that the ecumenical movement has shown us, that of reconciliation, if you prefer a slogan, unity in diversity. The freedom of organization and thought in the local churches, and unity in the proclamation of Jesus Christ, and the attempt to live as witnesses of his love. The relationship with the Catholic Church in a Catholic country does not mean, however, that our Church gives up explicitly announcing the gospel of Christ. Therefore, at this point, I would like to move to the third item, evangelism. As I have said, in our city churches, the secularization of our young people has been compensated by the arrival of people joining us, often from Catholic families. In fact, almost all Italians, are nominally Catholics. They baptize their children as Catholics and attend some services. But only 10% of them are actively part of the Church. The question we have asked ourselves as a church is, how many Italians don't go to Mass because they don't agree with the idea of the Catholic Church? How many of them know that it would be possible to live out the Christian faith in another way than the way they have been taught? Because you must be aware that nevertheless internet, television, media, information at all levels, Italians have been very well educated by the, what could I say, by the Jesuit system of education, which was, let us drop all what disturbs. Do not speak of it, it will disappear. You want an example? An example of the fact that Italy completely ignores Protestantism. My father was a worker. He worked in a factory in the 60s, 20 kilometers away, 15 miles away from the Waldensian valleys. One day, it was the period of the economical boom, he found his name enlisted among those who had to go to work on Easter Day. So he went to ask to his boss, why? My father's boss was a chemistry doctor, is to say, a man who had to study at university till 25. And the answer of this well-educated person was, oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Pasquale. I thought that Easter was just for us Christians. That is, apart from some people who are interested in this, the common comprehension of what is to be a Protestant. Perhaps you are not a Christian. So, historically, the Counter-Reformation sought to exclude the Protestantism from the culture of our country, and they did a very good job from the important view. A few years ago, our synod established a commission for evangelism, which produced material, booklets, leaflets, Bible, posters, information, and so on. Certainly, we cannot boast great results. The evangelical churches are more successful in this with their more legalistic view of faith with precise rules. Instead, we concentrate, and we won't still concentrate, on the freedom that God's grace gives to believers and of the gift of God's love. I don't want to say that that is the truth, but it's the vocation which we feel God has given to our church today in Italy, irrespective of results. One thing is certain, told. Our church are terribly timid when it comes to evangelism. They are scared to go beyond the safe wall of the church to preach on the street, both physical street as well as figurative one. Being a pastor in the Waldensian valleys for many years now, I often ask myself about the problem of re-evangelization of many men and women who were originally members of our churches, but who now have distanced themselves from them. For me, it is a very current problem, because These people have spent years in Sunday school, catechism classes, then they have walked away. But I have no answer. It is sad. To say that this is the result of today's secularization seems to me to be too convenient. To say that the teaching was not adequate seems to me to weigh us pastors down with fruitless guilt. I believe that we must never give up or become demoralized. And my wife would say that I am quite able to preach this and not to leave it, because sometimes I am very much demoralized about the situation of our church today. There is not a fix-at-all solution, but we do have the Spirit of the Lord who continues to send us into the mission field, even in spiritually difficult times like our own. Fourth, the relationship with other Italian Protestant churches. There is a Federation of Italian Protestant Churches, which unites Waldenses, Methodists, Baptists, Lutherans, and the Salvation Army, some free churches, and the Seventh-day Adventists as observer. Altogether, we do not number more than 40,000 members. On the evangelical side, just the Pentecostals, Assembly of God, and other independent churches number about 350,000, with the addition of the Brethren churches, Independent Evangelical Mission, American Evangelical Mission, churches made up of African, Latin American, and Asian immigrants. However, all these churches are evangelical in nature, with a literal view to the reading of the Bible and rejecting a critical historical approach to Scripture. If in the past differences were essentially in the area of the social and political action of the Church, today relations are quite strained because we are divided on ethical issues. Most of the historical churches, including us, have debated and are not against the blessing of the union of same-sex couples, and we are discussing themes relating to euthanasia, with the hope that there will be a law which gives respect to the wished expresses in living wills. Again, on the subject of differences, our Synod and the Federation of Pentecostal Churches has begun a courteous dialogue with one branch of Independent Pentecostal, and the first fruit of this was a joint celebration of the 500th anniversary of the Reformation in Rome at the end of October 2017. But still, there is a big gap among historical and evangelical churches in our country. 5. The diaconal work of our church. As I have said, if we count all the Waldensian and Methodist church members, yes, each and every one, there are only about 20,000 of us. However, when it comes to filling in the declaration of income form, about 500,000 of Italians choose to support the social work of the Waldensian Church. This is because of the 8 per 1,000 system invented. It could have been invented only in Italy with a Catholic mentality, because it was invented to finance the Catholic Church from state funds. Every Italian, when they pay their taxes, knows that 8 per 1,000 will be collected to this end. Originally, you could choose to opt for the Catholic Church or the state as the recipient of this money, but gradually the system was extended to include other faiths, other Christian, Jewish, and Buddhist. Our church, however, took an important decision, which is still current. The money that comes from this source cannot in any way be used for pastors, church building, or evangelism. We are convinced that church and state should be separate, not so obvious in Italy, and we are convinced that if you love your church, you should support it financially. All the money received, and we are receiving a lot of money from 500,000 of Italians, is used for social and cultural projects or care, which is available to all. Beyond this, and this was a synod decision of our church, at least 40% of this money is put into similar projects in countries less well off than our own. So this money goes for social and cultural and assistance projects in other countries, not in Italy. For instance, a part of it supports the diaconal work of the church in Rio de la Plata. Why do so many Italians support us in this way? It is certainly something to do with the separation of church and state, and our motto, not even €1 for our church services. Whereas about 80% of the enormous sum received by the Catholic Church goes to their priests and church buildings. Certainly, some of the credit also goes to the institution run by our diaconical commission, care homes for the elderly, young people, projects for migrants, which are known to be well run. In Italy, something well run simply indicates that there is not corruption in it. It is not so common. The same can be said of our cultural projects, libraries, museums, cultural center, and exhibition, all run by our church. It is obvious this is not with our problem. Some already talk of the swollen and extremely well-off diaconal work as opposed to the scrawny, poor church. While we are speaking now, in the valley there is the local synod. The Waldensian church is divided in 4 districts. The first district are the Waldensian Valley. And one main point of discussion is this one. We have a always poorer church and congregation and diaconical work which is growing. Are we going to support this for a long time? They are discussing. I'm afraid I'm displeased I had to come here because I would have something to say about that. This is not far from the truth. How do we balance an institution such as a church, hit by secularization, which thrives on donation, with a reality meaning that monies come from an obligatory tax because so many Italians choose us as beneficiaries? It is also a matter of the good reputation which our church has amongst many Italians. I think that it is often exaggerated, this good opinion. Personally, I ask myself about our inability to transform this appreciation of our church into an invitation to take up the good news of Christ. However, we believe that these possibilities are given to us so we can help solve many social problems, including immigration. Point 6. The present situation in Italian society. This can be summed up with just 2 words. Economic crisis, long, without an end in sight, and which seems always going worse. And the other word is immigration. We received many immigrants in our country because if you look at the geographical map, Italy is the closest European country to Africa, together with Spain. And as I said before, this crisis is going to be, well, actually, it was quite successful. Rosette. I start again. Economical crisis and immigration led some party, who are now the new Italian government, to say we must stop immigration. There is an invasion. We must be afraid of this. And so we heard in the electoral campaign easy slogans like, we have too many migrant mouths to feed. It is all politicians' fault, and it is all fault of the European Union. This was successful because many Italians voted these slogans. They may be afraid about that. Our church made a different choice. Simply said, these people are immigrants. When they don't drown in the Mediterranean, because thousands of them were drowned in the Mediterranean, we must do something in order to help. So, together with other state and Catholic organizations, we have decided to provide help because we are aware that this is what Christ commands us to do. We have founded a project, Mediterranean Hope, with volunteers who are there on the island, Lampedusa, the southern island of Italy, to provide immediate aid, and who then, with the guidance of the authorities, organize the refugees to be taken to the many welcome centers throughout Italy. Some of these centers are run by our diaconical commission. They look after the refugees until their claim for asylum has been accepted or refused. Those who are refused often disappear and remain in Italy illegally. For legally, we cannot do any more for them. But should not the commands of Christ speak to us about these too? That's a question which is open in front of us. Another project is the humanitarian corridors, which we run together with the Federation of Protestant Churches and the Sant'Egidio community, an important Catholic social welfare group. This works to safely bring to Italy, often at our own expense, families of Syrian refugees who have been seriously affected by the war, in order to look after them until they are integrated into society or until they will decide to go back because the situation is now better. This way, at least some, too few, are saved to the crossing of death across the Mediterranean. 7, and last, conclusion, our ecumenical stance. The Waldensian Church considers dialogue with other Christian churches as vital and feels particularly close to other Protestant churches in the world, with whom it seeks to maintain strong and constant ties. Our church has always been, and still is, member of many international organizations of Protestant churches. World Council of Churches, World Alliance of Reformed Churches, nowadays World Communion of Reformed Churches, member of the European Protestant Churches, signed the Loyenberg Concordat among Reformed and Lutheran, and member of other organizations. Also, you must be aware that to become a pastor in our church, you have to spend at least a year studying in a foreign theological college after or during the 4 years of our theological study. There are a number of reasons for this international engagement of our church. First, we need to remember what I tried to say yesterday. Historically, the medieval Waldensian movement was a European in character, not bound to any nation or territory. Today, we are a very small church which needs the support and prayers of other churches around the world. But also we want to avoid the risk of sectarianism inherent in the word small is beautiful, which often leads to thought of being the only inheritors of the truth. We, therefore, need new ideas, the renewing and the challenges that other churches can offer us. We consider ourselves representative of the Protestant reality in our country, the Vatican reality. We need the contribution both in thought and action of Protestantism around the world today. Finally, and perhaps a little presumptuously, we think that the contribution of our experience as a small church in a large Catholic country can help other churches who share our passion for the gospel, because this passion for the gospel, I hope, will be the last thing that the Waldenses will keep until the kingdom come. Thank you very much.